So before I start my next big project, I'd like to wrap up one or two small ones that are on my workbench. First of all, this is the chimney from my Babyland nursery. And you may recall my Mark's Pet Shop was missing a chimney, and then I remembered, well, my Babyland nursery had a chimney, and I bet they are the same, and I believe they are. So I've taken this off my Babyland nursery and flattened it out. I'm going to clean it and just do a little paint touch up, and then I'll photograph it. Then I can print it out, and then I can replicate this and put it on my Mark's Pet Shop. So my Mark's Pet Shop will be complete. But then also I can make it available to anybody else that is missing the chimney on either their Babyland nursery or their Mark's Pet Shop. Or if you're lucky enough to have a Mark's Little Red Schoolhouse, I think it would fit on that too. So let's get it wiped up with, first I'll wipe it off with alcohol and then with a cleaner. Then we'll just do a little bit of touch up along here. Then we'll be ready to photograph. Then after I photograph it, I'll bend it back into shape and put this back on my Babyland nursery. All right, I'm going to get brown, black, antique, white, red. We're going to start with those and put a drop of each one of those on my palette. So I'm not exactly sure how to make that rusty color that's up here around the top of this. But we're going to try a little brown and red and maybe just a little bit of that off-white and see how that goes. I think that's pretty good. So I'm just going to go ahead and use that on all these little areas where there's just a little bit of scratching or paint gone. And then if I need to do another coat, I can always adjust that color slightly and put another coat. But that's really not too bad. Let's fill all those little spots in all the way along here. And then right here, there's a spot that's light. That's not too bad for a first coat. It's going to need another coat. And as always, this paint dries a little bit darker than it is when it's wet. And I think this is dried a little darker and it's almost a little muddy colored. So when I mix up my next layer, which will be very close to the same shade I used last time, I'm going to try to make it a little bit lighter. And I'm going to use white rather than that antique white. See if that will brighten it up a bit. And I've also put a little dab of yellow here on my palette. I might try adding a little bit of yellow and see if that will brighten that up just a little bit. Let's see how we can do. And I'm going to guide it off of my other spot on the palette that I used before so I can use that to kind of gauge where I am. All right, I've done a color adjustment on those and they're looking really good. Now, this chimney was not that bad, and if I was just going to keep it and use it, I probably wouldn't have done a thing to it. But since I'm going to photograph it, I want it to look as good as it can because, you know, those photographs are likely to be, it could be printed off and used by somebody else, and if so, if you print this off to use it, I'd like it to be as nice as it can be. Plus, also, those pictures might stay online. I don't know how long. They could still be there in 5 or 10 years. So I'd like them to be as good as possible since the digital image will last a long time, perhaps longer than the actual chimney does. All right, I'm going to do a little bit of touch up on these grout lines and then a little bit right in here using probably an antique white with maybe a little bit of yellow in it. Then we're going to call this done. I made an attempt to paint this grout line without taping it off, and it didn't come out as precise and nice as I wanted it to. So I've gone ahead and taped off all of these with a little bit of masking tape so I can touch up all of those little grout lines. They're not too bad, but as I said, as long as I'm here and doing it, I'm going to do it right. Now, of course, the penalty for this is that when I pull this tape off, it's going to pull off some of that rust colored paint I just put on there. So live and learn. I should do the grout lines first, tape them off, do the grout lines, and then do the color. Let's go ahead and do those grout lines now that they're all taped off. Okay, I've given that a minute to dry. Let's pull this tape off and see how much collateral damage we have to those rusty areas. I touched up that rust-colored painted area with a few little spots where the paint had pulled off from the tape. Now those grout lines look good, and so does the rest of the chimney. I think it's done. However, since these parts that I painted are along that crease where that's going to be bent, I'm going to go ahead and Mod Podge at least everything from here on up, this whole rust-colored area and the grout. I'm going to cover that with Mod Podge so that when I bend it back into shape, it'll help protect that paint so that I don't chip that paint off too bad as I'm bending this back into shape. So I'm going to put the Mod Podge on there and let it dry. I don't know if you guys have any interest in seeing me put this back into shape. I'll probably do it off camera. I'm going to get my wood out here and I'll just show you how it's going to go. Here's how I'll bend this back into shape once the Mod Podge is dry. I'll use my hardwood floor, which has got some nice sharp edges on it, like this one here. I'll use that edge, and I'll bend this over, and using my hands, I'll bend that down as good as I can, tap it into place with either my rubber hammer, or I've got my new little hammer with a nylon edge on it. I might use that, and I might use pliers. Now these are pliers that I've covered up that ridge inside in order to protect my dollhouse pieces. I've covered that up with tape, and I might use those to get that down into place. And I'll do this bend, and then I'll do this bend, and I'll do this bend, and of course the final little bend, and then I'll put it back into shape and it'll be ready to go. All right, it's good to get one project done off my work table. Let me see if I can get another one done in the next day or two. We're on a roll.